Welcome to Engineer in the Loop, the podcast for people who develop with models in the mix. We have a Brianless episode, but fear not, we have special guest Elliott, who is a principal architect at Synextra. How's it going, Elliott?
Hey, very good. Thanks for having me on today.
Yeah, thanks for joining us. I think you might be the second or third overseas guest we've had. Not too many. So how's it going in your neck of the woods?
Yeah, very good. Thanks. Yeah, you're in the middle of the day, aren't you? It's or I suppose a positive is I've got to the end of mine already, but no, it's really good. It's nice to speak to people that are across the pond as well.
Yeah, for sure. It's cool to see how even across the pond we still struggle sometimes with the same things business wise of, we were
Yeah,
just talking about servers and all those things. I do have to
yeah.
comment before we got on, I was telling Elliot his background's pretty sick because that is not a virtual background, and I think that's worth calling out as.
No, this is very real. I've got a very talented marketing team, and specifically a guy called Michael Clegg in the marketing team. He's like our producer. He's the one that has set this up today. So yeah, no, I'm very happy with it.
Yeah, it's pretty cool looking.
Yeah.
Um, so to get started, we always like to set kind of a level set. How did you kind of get into technology? I know you're a principal engineer or principal architect now. How'd that start? What did getting into tech look like for you?
So I have been in tech for I look and I say this all the time. I look incredibly youthful, I know, but I've been doing this for about 15 years now. And I actually started as kind of like a call handler for a managed services team. So I've done everything through managed service, through engineering. I did a lot of physical engineering at one point. So I did like board level repairs in data centers on servers. So a pretty well rounded knowledge as a result of that. But then over time, moved into server AD infrastructure and then eventually Exchange and sat with Exchange for quite a while. So I spent a good portion of my career doing like small business server moves, Exchange 2003 sort of upgrade path cycles. And then this wonderful thing called Office 365 and Azure came along. And I actually thought, and I don't really tell a lot of people this, but I don't mind saying it. Obviously, it's on the internet now anyway. But um, I thought when Office 365 first started and Exchange Online started, it was only going to be for small businesses and it would never catch on. And boy, was I wrong. So then I spent the rest of my career just moving people into the cloud. So again, it was heavy 365, so all modern workplace, Exchange Online, SharePoint, OneDrive. Things got a little bit more serious, and we started, or I started doing more as it was then, Azure Active Directory type stuff. And then because of my previous infrastructure and application background, the natural progression was always to then be an Azure guy. And for the last, well, I'm trying to think how many years now, 6, 7 years probably, I've been working with organizations big and small, mainly private, but some defense as well, about working on digital transformation. So I, very early days, did some lift and shift stuff, but for most of my Azure time, it's all been how do we not use VMs like we were talking about servers before? How do we avoid that? How do we get maximum return for the investment and protect our platforms? And now these days, obviously, a lot of that was consulting. Um, these days, more recent years, I've done a lot of business transformation. So, how can a business use technology to increase revenue or drive down costs or whatever it might be? And now I run a team. We're a pretty successful MSP. We specialize in legal and heavily regulated. But I run a team where we do exactly that. So we do actual delivery as well. Don't get me wrong. But we heavily involved in the how do we make things better, rather than how do we just move your stuff to the cloud.
Yeah, I think that's sometimes where people get lost in the shuffle, right? Of like they have these two parity systems sometimes, and the cloud isn't quite better, and they end up being in a worse situation because they're paying for cloud and on prem
Yeah.
instead of like making the cloud better and actually gaining the benefits of the cloud. I am curious, just being over the pond with you talked about legal and heavily regulated. I know it's always in discussions when we're stateside talking about like building software solutions if they want to go overseas. We always talk about like GDPR, like a lot of the stuff that
Yeah.
you guys are probably in the thick of day in and day out. How do you guys kind of handle some of those laws and regulations, especially I think US wise, it looks like the US is more of like a wild west and you guys have like actual data protection policies and we're just like,
We
whatever
do,
works.
yeah. Yeah, there's been some recent news as well about Microsoft's US arm having access to European data. Now, that's always been the case. There's some metadata that Microsoft have to be able to reach into, and obviously they're a US entity, so therefore
Mm-hmm.
US has that access. Um, GDPR generally at the beginning at least was quite a scary thing for a lot of businesses, but very quickly it was quite easy to see that if you handled data properly, it wasn't going to be an issue. There were a lot of businesses that weren't handling data properly. So, from a data sovereignty point of view, that meant that really you just needed to keep your data where it was required. General rule of thumb: if you stick to that, you'll be fine. But then that was complicated a little bit further when the UK left the EU.
Yeah.
So there was always going to be this thought that okay, now we've got GDPR. Okay, now we've left the EU. So does that mean all UK data needs to sit in the UK? And for a very small set of companies or small sectors, that is the case. So specifically around things like defence, or where there's a government tied to finance. But generally speaking, it's fine being in the European Union. So we still have many clients that use North Europe and West Europe. There is a reluctancy, unless you're international, though, to put the data in slightly less compliant regions. I'll word that carefully. Because obviously the regulations are far lower. And if the local governments want access to data in some of the regions, they can just request it. Depends what you do, though, right? If you've got nothing to hide, you're not really a target, does it really matter?
Right. That was like I saw the Microsoft news, like I just skimmed the headline because I'm not big into the data separation or any of that kind of stuff. So I was just like, that's an interesting thing. But kind of to your point, like depending on what the metadata is, like Facebook, like all these other different companies probably already have it and more. Like
Yeah.
Microsoft needs some metadata to be able to send you a bill,
Yeah.
and their
Yeah.
billing arm is. Sorry, go
A,
ahead.
a bunch of the metadata, or at least this used to be the case, was just around Entra. So if it was UPNs, stuff like that, then is that a huge problem anyway? Because if you scalp a domain or you do some phishing or whatever it is, you could easily get all the list anyway. So is
Mm-hmm.
it a huge problem that I trust Microsoft with my data? Now, obviously, if you do something wrong and you do it against a US entity, and you know, there's a chance that someone could get involved and request your data. But the companies I work with, or the organisations I work with, I should say, aren't really trying to overthrow the US government. So I don't think I've got any problem.
It's one of those things too that like when people talk about trusting like Microsoft or the big tech giants too, I'm like, yeah, but your company trusts Bill over there who's been, your main security guy for 15 years and Microsoft's been attacked at such a scale that you will never ever see because there's no real way that you could hold off some of the attacks that like the big companies are getting hit by.
No,
And if you
no.
trust them with your data and security, like do you really need to be overly concerned? No, I don't think so. But is it okay to be cautious and like keep an eye on them? Sure. I think that's just a fair safety thing.
Yeah, so a lot of what we do is, like I say, digital transformation. So we'll talk to clients about moving services into PaaS. Really is the goal. So we start with SaaS. If it can be an option, they'll go into that. So something like Dynamics 365, and then if not, PaaS. And sometimes the pushback I'll get is, well, if I go into a PaaS service, I'm vendor locked because it's not a VM. And then if the vendor's not available, what am I going to do? If Microsoft goes under, and we've had that, because Microsoft are far better than Bob and Bill that are running your racks in your office. If they go
Yeah.
under, we've got way bigger issues. Um, so that's always an interesting point to come back with.
Right. Especially if they're using like Outlook for all their emails and Word and all that. Like, I know, I think in the EU, they're starting to move to some more like Linux-based software for government entities. I thought it was Norway, but I could be misremembering.
I I wanted to say Switzerland or Sweden. I think you're right. They went to
Yeah.
LibreOffice, didn't they?
Yeah. So like
Yeah.
they are going to
It's
be the only people in the clear if Microsoft stops making Office products, but the
yeah,
rest of
but
us.
it doesn't feel like the right move to me. Like everyone's used to using modern platforms. Like, have you ever used Libre? It just looks old. I know it's open
Yeah.
source. I get that, but don't know. I don't mind
And it
paying.
yeah, and it's not as feature rich and then you have the learning curve like you can relate. I've been on the other ends of the calls when people can't get their computer to turn on. Because in high
Yeah,
school, I was just doing like entry level, like sysadmin, just trying to help people with IT support stuff of my high school. So like I was the guy who went in and said, "Hey, when was the last time you rebooted your computer?" And they're like, "I feel like I did it just yesterday." And you check the uptime, and it's been up for like 2.5 years.
yeah,
And you're like,
yeah.
"That might be the issue." And like
The old turn it
so
off and on again.
yeah. And that's the range of people you're going to have to teach LibreOffice, right? Of the people who don't know how to turn off their computer to maybe more technically sound people that'll probably be fine picking it up. But I just think of like, if people can't figure out Office with the decades of experience, the amount of information on the internet, throwing another tool that looks old and feels clunky is just going to make people upset. And I'm
Yeah.
curious on
I
what
think
that
I think the
adoption will
way that
look like.
yeah, if you look at the Microsoft ecosystem, I talked about this with a few people, but the 80/20 rule, right? So Microsoft is often one of the best products, but not always the best. But
Hmm.
what they do really well is because all the tools interlink with one another, you start using like Word and use it with OneDrive or use it with SharePoint. The experience as a user is just far easier. You take LibreOffice and then maybe you've got Dropbox or something behind it. Yeah, you're gonna struggle. Your user base of 2,000 people, you're probably going to have 20% of them raise a ticket once a week or something like that. Yeah, we
Right.
don't need that in our world.
And then they keep, Microsoft builds out these SharePoint connectors and all that for like their AI tool sets, and you have Copilot that can browse all your documents and whatnot. Like there's just, to your point, it's kind of like the same old ecosystem of Apple products, right? Like everything just meshed together so well that it's hard to get out of it. And people
I
would be
think
like,
it
go for it.
gets a bad rep in the same way as well. Like how
Hmm.
Apple products are expensive. You've got them on. I've got some in. Like they get a bad rep because they're expensive, but then you use a Mac and a phone and some headphones together, and you see why this expensive ecosystem's worth being a part of because it's just nice to use,
Well, and I do even like some mood lighting on my personal computer. It's a 2015 MacBook Pro. I don't know
and
anybody
it's
rocking
still
it.
absolutely fine.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Nobody's rocking a 10-year-old Windows machine doing dev work in AI. Like,
No, you could have some XPS or some Alienware or something, and that old it would just be falling over and probably propping a door up at this point.
right. Yeah, and I think that's the difference too, right? It like, yeah, you're kind of vendor locked or in that ecosystem, but then you get all the benefits of being in that ecosystem, right? Like,
Yeah.
I have a buddy who's a big Android guy, and he'll always tell me how his phone is better and blah blah blah. And then I'm like, yeah, but to change something on your phone is super clunky, or to like do different features are difficult, or you have to like be a computer engineer to change the background of your phone. I'm like, I don't want to deal with that with other technology. I do enough with tinkering in my day job that sometimes I just want it to work.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, don't get me wrong. I used to have like a little cluster at home. I would run all sorts of stuff on it, and yeah, maybe I'd play with an Android or whatever. These days, no. I'm far too busy with tech in the day that after the end of the day, that's it. I'm done. Maybe some pet projects, but it's probably going to be in Israel, to be honest.
Right.
Um, I do a lot of or we do a lot, but me specifically, I do a lot of infrastructure as code. That's my thing. So
Hmm.
that's what I brought in here. So some of the time out of hours, that's what I'll probably be doing. Probably make a mini project of some new product that we can start selling. Hopefully.
Awesome. What's your infrastructure of code choice? Are you Microsoft or
I do all three. Well, I say all three. There's more than three, but I do. I think I originally started on ARM, then I was a Terraform convert, like through and through.
Hmm.
Terraform until the end of time, probably. But a client did ask me to get involved in Bicep, and for about a year, maybe a year and a half, I did a lot of Bicep. And I didn't hate it. I didn't hate it as much as I thought I would. I think it's pretty good. It's pretty good, especially if you don't need to use Terraform for anything else. I like
Hmm.
Terraform because of the versatility of it. So because I can use it on so many different platforms, like I could reach into VMware, have it configured. Like if I want to go to a client and say you need to build out an IT team that's going to work in your like going forward plan.
Hmm.
If three of them have infrastructures as code skills and they're all Terraform, but they've got multiple cloud platforms or multiple systems they want to manage, then it's a no-brainer. If they're only going to use Azure, maybe they've only got one person that's going to learn it and they're not huge, like infrastructure requirements aren't huge, I'd probably just say Bicep anyway.
That's fair. I've been a big convert of Pulumi. That's one I like to mess around
Yeah.
with. Um, Terraform just always, I've always had issues with the state files and just breaking stuff on whenever I try to do a toy example. Um, I might be coming around slightly just
Love
because,
state. I think
oh, really?
it's yeah, because like when you do, like if you take Bicep and you do a what if,
Yeah.
okay, it's going to tell you what it's going to deploy. If you do state, it tells you every single little setting that's going to be changed for all those resources. So sometimes what we'll do, especially when we're dealing with a new API provider, so I'm trying to think of one that came out, like container apps when that first came out. There was an
Hmm.
API provider, so we could deploy it, but we didn't fully understand the documentation because sometimes it's wrote by an engineer and it's a little bit, you know, so we deploy it, go and make some changes in the portal, and then retrospectively run a plan and see what we would lose, and then write those changes back into the Terraform so that we then get our like gold standard of what the Terraform module is going to look like.
Okay, so you kind of used it that way to do, yeah, because I've seen people do like the download the template and you get so much extra boilerplate that sometimes it's like not really
Yeah.
worth it in my opinion, but
Yeah, we have a strict policy internally where it's minimal code, right? So
Mhm.
if you give me 50 lines and 49 of the values are set, but they're set to the default value, I don't want them unless they're going to be changed in the future because
Right.
it's the default anyway. So just give me the one line that it required. I mean, it's always more than one,
Yeah,
but
I
yeah.
gotcha.
So we do a lot of their, or I've done at many places now. I do a lot of standardization for the stuff that we're always deploying because I want things I want us to adopt standards, come up with exactly what good looks like, and then it always be deployed in the same way. I
So do you guys, sorry, go ahead.
well, no, go on.
Internally then, do you guys have just like a shared or module repository that you just like, oh, hey, I know this client's going to need an app service plan with a VNet and private endpoints. Here's that one I already have. Or like, how have you kind of streamlined that process or defined what
So
good looks like?
yeah, so we have a internal module repo, but it's a little bit more granular than that. So you'll say like, I need a VNet, but you might already have a VNet existing because of another deployment. So you might say, actually, I just want an app service that's going to be VNet integrated, and you pass in that the ID from the previous VNet that exists in state.
Hmm.
So our modules are like resources. Obviously, you could have in Terraform, for those that don't know, they're like individual building blocks that you add together, and then you make your overall deployment of all the things that you want. A module is a combination of those building blocks together. Um, so we will put a few of them together. We won't make the modules too big, but then a deployment is a set of modules. So we might say for a greenfield landing zone, maybe there's 12, 15 modules that are used, but it's all automated. Um, and out of those 12 or 15, each of those will have like, it might have a VNet, might have a couple of VMs, it might have a key vault, a storage account, maybe some app service or some SQL. So it's done in a way that anyone should be able to pick up new services. Like APIM's one of the recent ones that I put in there. So you could say like, I want APIM, I want it to be VNet integrated. By the way, that's our standard, so you can't have anything else anyway. Um, and then they can just go and deploy, and they just have to make sure that it's past the right variables. I think there's
Hmm.
only 6 things it needs to be able to do that. And then that means that as we go customer to customer, because we have a managed service element in the company, as we go from customer A to customer B, that we know that they're the same. And then the only difference is what the development teams are doing in terms of what Swagger files and APIs they're leveraging.
That makes a lot of sense, especially for managed services, because I even think like if you, so my company does more consulting, like custom software, app dev, and the client's workload might look entirely different. We sometimes have to integrate with like their CI/CD or infrastructure as code procedures. So like you're not going to pick me up, for example, and drop me on your project, and you're not going to come to mine and be like, oh, hey, it's like I haven't missed a beat. There's some ramp up time there sometimes.
Yeah.
That's a super interesting way of doing that. That way, you guys can all bounce between stuff, and it's not, hey, I need to call up Elliott because he did this implementation and he does this weird thing that I haven't seen before. It's, hey, we kind of have a standard approach. And I would imagine from a bidding perspective or from like a time or quoting perspective too, that also helps you then know how long stuff should take, because it's not, I'm having to rebuild this like from scratch again the 15th time. It's,
Yeah,
I
a
built
lot of
this
our
once.
yeah, we want to provide the digital transformation bit, right? So that is helping your developer. I always talk about developer experience, helping
Mm-hmm.
your developer not have to get involved in infrastructure. And when you go from like an IaaS based team or company and go, let's do all this cloud stuff, the developers start to shrink in the chairs a little bit, thinking, God, he's going to start talking about AKS, and then I'm going to have to manage these nodes and do all this other stuff. So the reason why we do it in this way is because then we just provide them a platform, and then we provide them with some like starter template pipelines, and we go, no, all you got to do is write some .NET code that you're already doing, that you know how to do, and you can just push it to this location, and there you go. And then the developers in the early days of those workshops start to like sigh a little bit and be like, oh, this actually sounds like this could be a positive rather than a negative.
It's so weird too, because you focus it from that standpoint. My experience of getting into Azure was because we were waiting on like an ops team to actually build out our infrastructure.
Yeah.
We came into a project and we were told, oh, hey, the infrastructure's done, your pipeline's done. All you guys are going to be doing is slinging code. Don't worry about it. So you're like, okay, cool. We got there and figured out that every time we pushed to our repo, the pipeline asserted that true was true and finished. That's all it did. Like, didn't actually deploy any code, deploy any infrastructure. So like, we hit the ground running because their ops team, they kind of got themselves into this cycle of everything was on fire because they didn't have time to implement standards. And because they didn't have time to implement standards, people were doing their own thing, which caused everything to be on fire. They're just kind of stuck
Yeah.
in this cycle. Um, so when we came in, we're like, hey, we're going to just like do it the right way and let you guys know what we're doing and the decisions we're making. That way, you don't have to babysit us, but also then if you have any sort of opinions or thoughts, let us know. And then I think they started abstracting some of our stuff out to like a shared repository area because it was just a simple like web app with a database,
Yeah.
nothing
Yeah.
crazy. Um, so from a dev standpoint, that was nice because it allowed us to move.
Which again, developer experience, going back to the same thing. So we look at like I look at all the common things that devs say to me, because really that's our major selling point, and it's been my major selling point probably for the last 2 or 3 years at least. Is the bit in the middle, the platform ops, platform engineering. How do you make that really good? And one of the things that's done really well is resource vending. So this is developers don't like having to wait for people, because their job, no matter what you say, their job is to ship good code, as quickly as possible. That's their job.
Mm-hmm.
Infrastructure's job is to make sure that infrastructure is deployed and available. And then security, can't forget security, is to make sure that no one does anything silly. So resource vending is a concept of providing templates that developers can use, that they call down but can't modify, to deploy all the things that they want without having to get infrastructure available. So maybe I deploy a VNet and an app service plan already, and you've got like this area. Let's say you've got a service called Portal, and you're going to run that. And now every time you want a new web app that's going to leverage the same app service plan, let's say, there's a resource vending template that you can pull from, and then you can just change the variables. So maybe your app settings are different. Maybe storage account and the way that you access files is different. Maybe you want to do some RBAC in that as well. But then from a developer point of view, you've not had to wait. You've not had to wait for a change request. You've just deployed the thing and then deployed your code to it. And for for a dev, at least the devs that I've come into contact with, the web app is as far as they want to look. They don't want to look at the VNet that it's integrated into. They don't want to look really at front door or API management gateway. They just care about the web app.
Right. And then they can just, be secure. Because I think that's the other thing you sometimes get real hard pushback on when you're, we preach a lot of full stack development, which is more of the developer owns the full stack. That I think is the biggest pushback we get sometimes is like, well, my developer doesn't want to learn Terraform or YAML or Azure or whatever.
Yeah.
Where I think if you
I
do
think it's
have an
quite
ops team.
dangerous. I think
Okay, go ahead.
that could be like if you've got a really good full stack developer, brilliant. But they're actually quite hard to find that are like super competent in all the areas. It's easier to find people that are really competent in the thing that they do well. So like maybe .NET, like you're amazing at it. You can make really cool stuff. So if you like give people the ability to deploy their own infrastructure, you leverage Azure policy, ideally using infrastructure as code, then you can sort of put those guardrails in place. And then the developer can do whatever they want, but they can't make the mistake. So a good example of that is like SCM on a web app. You don't want that publicly available. So maybe you just have a policy that prevents that from being publicly available. And then maybe even in the development subscription, the devs can just go and click and deploy a web app if they want. And then we're not worried and they can deploy as they would normally.
Yeah, I think that and cost can potentially get quickly out of control because I think you brought up the term Azure landing zones. I'll ask you to define that here in a second, but I think what some companies do is they just go, hey, we're going to move to the cloud, go have fun. And then, developers are deploying, production level SKUs of everything across every environment.
Yeah.
They forget about resources. A previous role I was in, we had a company that spent, I think, about $250,000 every month or every 3 months on databases that weren't being used because the DBAs just like made replicas and just left them there. And we're like, hey, should we delete this? This is a ton of money. And they're like, nah, because we just don't want to make the DBAs mad. And we're like, but they're not using them. And it's $250,000. But in case people aren't sure, or if they're trying to just start moving to the cloud, what is an Azure landing zone? Like, what do you mean by that?
Okay. So Microsoft have defined their best practice for your not just infrastructure, but your governance of a platform within Azure. So a landing zone is a collection of RBAC for security, for the actual infrastructure in terms of virtual networking, maybe the layout of the structure of where things sit within different subscriptions, and getting those fundamentals right around allow you to then further tune who has access to what, where policies are leveraged, where log analytics should sit so that you can collect all your data centrally. Landing zone, again, broad term, but is the blueprint that you should be using if you're deploying into the cloud. Because if you don't do it, you end up with a disconnected environment that doesn't have those guardrails in place, that doesn't use private virtual networking to connect everything together. And you'll either duplicate things, you'll have people having too much access, or you'll cause like major production issues further down the line. So defining like your core that everyone else to connect to, and it doesn't cost you a lot of money. You can do this relatively easily. Is the way that it should be done. Now, Microsoft have really pushed the best practice and actually have some deployment methods that you can use just from their portal to go and deploy all of this for you. So if you want to have just like a basic hub and spoke, so that's a network where a firewall will sit, and then some spokes at separate networks that maybe domain controllers sit in one, maybe an app sits in another, maybe some security tooling sits in another as well. And then when you've got the RBAC on top of it, you could then provide access to each of those areas without giving someone access to all of it. So to the point about app developers, we want to give developers the ability to be able to do what they want. I don't need to give an app developer access to domain controllers. They just don't need it. I mean, it depends how small your business is. But then we were talking about cost. If you do this and you use the subscription model, then you could leverage quotas or alerts or even a spending cap on a subscription. So if you say my budget for development for this year is $12,000, I'm going to set a monthly budget of $1,000 for the development subscription. Feel free, do what you want. When the money runs out, it runs out. That's it. You're not going to have any more. And then it'll just shutter the resources, or even alert you before it does that.
Yeah, I think that's some things that people don't necessarily always think about when they do a lift and shift or a transformation or something. They'll just come in and be like, yeah, we're just going to move it. We're going to figure that out as we go. And I do agree. I think there is a level of best practice or, planning that can help make further down processes or issues not able to happen or not as likely to happen, right? Like you always hear the stereotypical. I think everybody who played in Azure has always gotten that 1 month where their heart drops and they spent way too much money. That's usually because we're playing around in a sandbox environment or, not usually work related. And, oh, I didn't turn the thing off. Versus if you go in the, a landing zone, like you said, you can have budgets set, you can have predefined alerts, you can have incremental alerts even. So it can be
Yeah.
percentages of projected budgets. Like if you set it up correctly, there is almost no way you should be able to say we somehow went over our budget. I mean, granted, if you set like a $20 budget or something super low, maybe. But if it's a realistic budget and you're using realistic resources, like there shouldn't be a way that you shouldn't be aware that you're heading or trending towards burning through your budget.
Yeah, we leverage anomaly alerts, which is really good. So that's a more recent. I don't know when it actually came out, but that's relatively recent. Let's say that will look at trends over time. So the reason why we use it is because of ABD. We've got a large ABD estate for a lot of our clients, and it'll track rolling average based on day. So it won't just say, well, it's a Sunday and you've used less. It's intelligent. So this uses a bit of, I don't want to say machine learning because it's not. It's going to be, I think it's rolling average really is what it uses. But it'll fire out an email and say, like, there's been a 200% increase in this resource cost, like over 24 hours. So then immediately you can jump on it. So that's probably at a bare minimum. That's what people should be putting in place. Really, you want budget, you want real cost control. But at a bare minimum, just having visibility of what's changed. Like I had a client who turned on log analytics for an AKS cluster. It was on for I think it was 3 days or 4 days, something like that. And they turned on every field and they spent 14 grand and they did not expect it at all. So you have to be careful. If you've got some click happy dev who's working away, definitely with AI as well. They go into AI Foundry and they start spinning up some compute nodes and they I was talking to someone about an N100.
Mm-hmm.
I can't remember the actual SKU for it. And they were like, yeah, this looks like $3,000 or something. I was like, not sure I'd like that running in my environment.
My my Azure spending too much money once issue was build last year, I think. Marco Castellano was up there and he was like, oh, hey, we have like custom neural voice and you can go and train your voice in like 2 or 3 hours. And then like you just have it, like it talks for you. And then there was like a deeper one. And I was like, oh, this is so cool. So I did it. And I did like, I think 1 or 2 intros or conclusions of the podcast with it, like just screwing around. And then I left it. Well, the cost to host your voice, I believe, is, I forget the exact number, but it's like $5 an hour. And then you multiply that
Storage.
just to run basically your voice on a server, just to sit
Okay.
there and have it available. Was like
Okay.
$4 or $5 an hour, something crazy. You can do the math. It's about $3,000 a month.
Yeah.
If
How quick did you notice?
uh after I got the bill.
Okay. All
so,
right.
so I
Yeah.
got the invoice, and then the day I got the invoice, I emailed Azure support and all that, and I was like, "Oh my god, guys, I need help. I don't know what to do." And Microsoft, I will say to their credit, is usually pretty forgiving the first
Yeah.
time you do something like that. So like, hey, delete the resource if you haven't. We'll waive it this time, but try to do better. And I'm like, okay, will do. Thanks.
Yeah, I'm always cautious of telling people this, but like if you look at the T's and C's, because this actually came up for us recently, we were looking at a prospective client that might
Hmm.
default. So we were like, oh, what happens if you look at all the T's and C's? Microsoft basically say, nope, you are 100%. You're on the hook for this. You got to pay for it, and the same goes for like personally if you deploy something. But the real truth is they're actually quite nice because it hasn't truly cost them that money. That's lost revenue for them, but the compute was there. So
Well, and that was the whole reason, right? Like why Amazon first developed AWS is because they needed these servers to handle the surges of holidays. And then the other, let's say, 10 months of the year, they have these servers on racks doing nothing because they don't see that
yeah,
bandwidth. So, yeah, to your point, they already have these servers, they're already on racks.
but
Um,
AWS way less forgiving. Like I did a multi-cloud platform a couple of years ago, and
oh, yeah.
we had some really large platforms, and someone made a mistake. I won't say if that was the client or the company I worked for at the time, but someone made a mistake, and AWS were not budging at all. They were just not interested.
Dang. So they're literally just like, you're paying for it. Sorry.
Yeah, it was to the tune of about 6.5 grand as well. So it's not.
Ooh.
It was not fun. I think without going into too much detail, there was meant to be a decom process for something, and it remained online.
I
But
heard
yeah,
a similar thing with a contractor of a previous company I worked at. They left a something running and it was super expensive. And then they had an issue because like they were a 1099 and so a contractor and didn't have like errors and emissions insurance and it was like to the tune of 20 or 30K.
oh, so they're
And
literally liable for it.
yeah, well, luckily it worked out that Microsoft ended up forgiving them, I think. But it
Okay.
was really awkward because then the company would have had to go for after the contractor. Like it was this whole pain and thing and would have been a big issue, but luckily Microsoft was like, "Hey, we'll forgive you this one time."
Yeah, you can't
So,
do it again. Sorry.
yeah. And I've heard a few stories by that I feel confident enough to say like, "Hey, as long as you talk to them and like let them know as early as possible, they tend to be pretty forgiving in Azure."
I think
Um,
if it's clearly a genuine mistake, yeah. I think if you like try and skirt the rules and maybe you put like a Bitcoin miner in some
yeah,
massive farm and they can see CPU usage, then they're probably going to tell you to go away. But yeah, I think you're right. I think it's
yeah,
relatively safe to say it.
yeah. Like yeah, if like your VM that you provisioned is sitting at like 2% utilization the whole month, and then you get a huge bill, they're like, "Oh yeah, you probably just goofed." But
Yeah,
yeah, to
because
your point, if you
from a virtualization point of view, if it's at 2%, you've actually not used anything of their cluster at all. I mean, they could charge you for the 2%, right?
yeah, well, and then it's probably provisioned elsewhere. So
Yeah,
what do they
yeah.
care?
They would have provisioned the rest with Spot. Spot's brilliant. I don't think people talk about it enough. I suspect that people don't even know that it exists.
Oh, what is that?
So VM Spot is unreserved compute. So the bit of compute that doesn't get used by other people.
Hmm.
You can buy a SKU that uses that bit that isn't used by other people for X amount of time for a period. But then once your VM goes offline, it goes into shutdown. So if you have like, I was talking to someone about it not too long ago. I think it was ASOS. They were saying that they'll use Spot so that they can get loads of compute at 82%. I think it is 82% discount, but it's not reserved. So they'll like queue up jobs that go in for like mass processing. It'll wait until Spot becomes available. It'll sit on this 82% discounted CPU, run for the period it needs to run, and then come off. And then that's the end of it. So if you've got like high intensity workload, but you can wait for it to be deployed or for that task to run, it's a great idea. Like if you want to do mortgage calculations or something like that, it's perfect. You probably need to allow that you can wait 24 hours though. That's the only downside.
That's very similar to in the AI space, they have batch processing as well, where you can get I think it's 40% discount, but the
It,
SLA
do you,
is a 24-hour turnaround.
yeah, Yeah, a similar kind of thing. That was the reason why I said mortgage. I was thinking back to a client I used that used to use like heavy compute, and then I
Hmm.
think they went to batch processing in the end.
Okay.
But yeah, I know that. I'm sure it was ASOS. It might not be, so don't quote me on it. But I'm pretty sure it was ASOS I was speaking to.
Yeah,
Um,
that well, and there's all these these weird efficiencies that right like Microsoft doesn't want their servers basically idle. They want
no,
them to be running because they get billed, so they'll give you a discount. It's kind of like when you buy a seat on an airline, right? Like there's an amount that they are willing to discount it because the plane's going anyway.
yeah,
Like
I think
putting you
reserved instance is a brilliant idea from Microsoft because if you buy a 3-year reserved instance, which is so you're saying for this period of time, I'm going to commit that I'm going to use this many cores. You should always do flexible. It's just a tick
Mhm,
box, but it's dead easy to do. Um, in 2 years' time, that CPU, because it's tied to the version. So let's say you put yourself on V6, which is the latest. In 2 years' time, that's going to be well out of date. You know, we'll be on version 8 probably or version 9. Um, so they've got some old tin that was going to sit in the data center anyway. And at that point, you're still paying, okay, it was a discount, but you're still paying a hefty premium for it. It's better from a total cost of ownership because you know what the next 3 years is going to be. But
mhm.
for Microsoft, it benefits them massively. It also kind of ties you in because you'll be like, well, I'm probably not going to go to GCP. Probably wouldn't go there anyway, personally, but you're not going to jump because you're in a contract.
Right. Yeah, and then the people who like the bean counters in accounting like that more fixed cost, right? When they're doing all the
Yeah.
costs on the spreadsheets and whatnot, it's easier. Nobody likes to hear it depends when it comes to your total cost to run your business. They want to hear here's the exact amount. Here's how much we
Yeah,
need
it's
to
two hundred
make
pound.
a profit. Yeah, right.
I
It's a lot
I
easier than.
Yeah, I was trying to get a handle on how to speak to organizations about cost a bit better. This was like a year or two ago, and I did the all the FinOps stuff, you know, like
Hmm.
FinOps practitioner and engineer and stuff. Really, my big takeaway from that was because it's okay. So if you love FinOps, absolutely go and have a look at it. But my big takeaway from that was changing conversations from how much does the thing cost to what's the cost per customer or the cost per X. So especially when we look at things like app services, because wherever we've got scalable compute, so AKS or ACA or ACI, so we start talking about well per visit or per transaction of per visit, what's the cost for those? Because then from a business point of view, when I go to a board and say, I don't know, the compute's going to be 10 grand, and they go, wow, 10 grand's a lot. And I go, it is, but actually it scales because the more sales you make, this is how much cost it is per sale. And I go, oh, okay. Well, if we look at it that way, this is an easier platform to understand.
For sure. Yeah, because 10 grand seems like a lot, but if you can say, our customer acquisition cost is roughly five, or to your point, cost of sales $5,
Yeah.
and we know every time we make a sell, we're profiting, let's say $20. Like, as long as that math works out, it's like, oh, cool. So if we keep dumping the fuel on the fire and keep driving more people, if it's 5 grand, 10 grand, 15 grand, if we're growing in such a way that it's always profitable, who cares, right? Like, as
Yeah,
long as
yeah.
we can keep up with it.
It doesn't matter. Whereas the other way of doing it is, well, okay, I'm going to put VM in. It's fixed cost. I know how much it's going to cost me. You do, but then you'll get to a point where you're at capacity and you'll start
Mhm.
dropping sales. So yeah, you've
Yeah.
made more money in terms of profit, but overall, you're probably going to make less money.
Well, and then, yeah, you get the issues where people are leaving negative reviews or their
Yeah.
processes are bombing out, or maybe got like you double charge a credit card or something like
Yep.
that. Like, you get into a lot of those kind of issues where, hey, you've been pegged and your server does weird things because it's, at capacity.
Yeah,
And that's where I
we
think
do a lot of we do a lot of
go
work
for
with like housing, conveyancing, legal, where a lot of these legal firms now have like online portals to view or sign up or to pay for things. And
it. Hmm.
if you were thinking about buying a house and you went to set up an account with someone for conveyancing, and it just bombed out or there was a problem or something like that, you're probably going to either Alt F4 or just Google someone else's name. So the lost revenue there, I mean, in conveyancing, maybe it's a little bit less, but let's say it's £500 of lost revenue because that person just got bored of waiting for your site to load. So
Hmm.
it's, I think the SRE part I always say to everyone, and I put a post about it the other day, that every business is a tech business, right? So a law firm 5 years ago would have never thought they would care about being a tech business. But in the world of sat on your sofa playing on your phone looking for a lawyer, it just needs to work. And if it doesn't just work and it seems seamless, then the people are just going to walk away and go somewhere else.
I and I would even go further. Like the state I used to live in Iowa, they had like iowafindalawyer.com or something. It was like a state run thing, and they had basically a directory because I don't know about you, I don't have like a Rolodex of lawyers for different things or whatever. So like I had a buddy who'd be like, "Oh yeah, like here I needed somebody for this thing. Here's 10 people on the internet I can reach out to tomorrow." And I know based on like some of these government like things that they like give maybe a free consultation or like all these other things that, to your point, like because they have a website and because they're in this program, they probably get a kickback, I'd assume, from the state for the consultations.
Yeah,
Like
I'd
it's
imagine
extra
so.
revenue, extra clients. I mean, how else do you find some of these people too? Like if you're in a niche enough industry, if you're not on the internet, people are just gonna not know you even exist.
Yeah. Yeah, I think it's a bit weird to think that you could have, people buying houses off mobile phones, but I think that's been happening for ages now. No matter what the thing is that you're buying, you should be able to easily just Google, I don't know, put in your location, type the thing that you want. You should be able to find a really good website. And if you load on somewhere and it looks like some Windows 95, what was the application called? Dreamview? Is it Dreamview or Dreamweaver? I can't remember.
Dreamweaver?
Yeah, Dreamweaver for website building. If it looks like some horrible old thing that looks like it was made in MS Paint, you're probably not going to buy the services. So yeah, I think everyone needs to up their tech game massively, and a lot of people are, to be fair. But
Mm-hmm.
it's wildly different. I mean, not to go on about legal too much because I work like heavily in finance, but legal especially. There's some people in that are quite far behind the curve. Legal's an interesting one because they generally adopt tech a little bit slower. So finance and trading is lightning fast. The minute something's out, or even before it's publicly released, they're using it. Um, with legal, it's much further behind. But the ones that are using today, the ones that are using machine learning for like documentation review, are performing way better than the ones that aren't. Because instead of having a team of 200 paralegals, you've got 20 that are doing the same amount of work,
Yeah, and they're doing
which
it
I,
quicker and with less errors and emissions, right? Like
yeah,
it's
yeah.
crazy.
No, I think
I
that's been a huge win. I think the AI thing, right? AI, it gets talked about all the time. Machine learning has been going on for way longer than people think with ChatGPT. But what ChatGPT has done for the space, which is really good, is it brought it like mainstream so that everyone talks about ChatGPT or Copilot. And that didn't used to be the case because there's always, like, for as long as you can think of, process flows, yes, no, eventually you could have some level of machine learning. It's just now that it's abstracted away from us and it's far more complex than we would come up with. I say we. It's far complex than I would come up with. Maybe you could.
I don't think so. I think the other thing that people get caught up with, like it's the new hot sexy thing, but at the end of the day, like the reason engineers and software exists as a whole is for automating processes and procedures, right? Like if businesses could work, if the most optimal way to do business was in person on pen and paper, we wouldn't have technology, right? But there's streamlined, email, all that stuff. I think we're just seeing the next iteration of that too, to a certain extent. Of to your point, as bottom lines shrink or as people want to shrink their costs, I can now do 200 people's worth of work with 20, and hopefully also pay those 20 people better too, because like there's less money that has to go around. Um, I think it's just going to be a general win for everybody, and then I think we're going to see hopefully hyper competitiveness too to drive costs down as well. Because I actually just did a blog post of why I think by 2027 a lot of the big SaaS companies are going to be dead. Because like, why am
Okay.
I going to be a multi-year engagement with Salesforce for a data management platform that's difficult to use or unwieldy, or SAP? Like, pick your ERP of choice when I could just build it myself with AI because now I have all this extra engineering capacity internally that I can then reallocate to, line of business applications like that.
As long as they do it properly. I saw some
Correct.
post, I think it was yesterday, of someone showing like what goes wrong when you vibe code, and someone's made a website where there's a join waitlist button, and if you just go into developer mode, so hit F12 and highlight that button, you see everyone's email address that joined the waitlist.
Ooh.
So there's, yeah, this is the problem with like, here are all the tools, do whatever you want. So as long as people hire like a few good people, it's concentration, right? So like,
Yeah.
200 people to 20 people, you still want human input. I think some industries will become like complete commodities where you just buy a thing, and it's mainly automated. Some will always need customer service element. Like I don't know about you, but if I was gonna pay for someone to protect me in a legal case, I'd want a human involved at some point. I'd want to see the whites of someone's eyes and get my money's worth.
Hmm.
Um, but then from an engineering point of view, everyone's terrified of losing all the jobs and this, that, and the other. Um, they can't, because someone still needs to tell the thing what to do, still needs to interpret a business's vision and say no when the business is potentially wrong, because that happens all the time. And then, yeah, so you end up with less people, but you end up with more efficient people. So if you've got a team of 10 today, you might still have a team of 10 in 5 years' time, but they'll be doing the work of 50 that you could have today.
Yeah, and I think, it increases the business's bottom line, hopefully compensation, or, maybe you have more boutique firms that are doing stuff more equipped to your business processes and procedures.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
but yeah.
I do wonder what'll happen longer term. Like, one of the things that's always been good, maybe less so right now, but having younger people learn the basic stuff first before they get to the more complex stuff. Generally, I mean, that's how I learn, and that's how I know everything from physically putting a switch in a rack to, working with AI Foundry today. If you're gonna basically eradicate that early part, so I'm thinking like the small backlog tasks that sit in your on your backlog, that'll just get dealt with by agentic AI. What's going to happen for those more junior people that they're either going to be forced to immediately be more senior from day one and use all these
Hmm.
tools, and not really understand the background, or does it just stop and everyone that's currently doing it takes over the world and people just pick up a different job instead? I don't know.
It's really weird right now because I've heard across the industry, just my own observations, that it's hard for junior people to get jobs. I don't know if it's any harder than any other time or anybody else right now because the market right now is just kind of, at least in the U.S., receding a bit. Um, but yeah, I don't know how that works. It's the age old problem I've seen across the industry. I've only been in it for 6 years, but the everybody wants a mid or senior dev. Nobody wants a junior dev.
Yeah.
And there's the hard part of like, you need to potentially at some point build that pipeline yourself. Because if you don't, you're going to always probably be paying a premium.
Yeah, yeah, you can't hire everyone on six figures all the time. Like you do want some homegrown talent, and I don't, I would personally, I'd prefer someone that's gone through the cycle rather than just started. Like maybe they're a genius and they've come out of university and they just know stuff that puts them at like senior level straight away. But I'd also quite like to see that they've had to like put comments in lines of code for like 2 months, like just do
Hmm.
the dirty work that people don't really want to do, just so that they appreciate all of the work, and understand what's happening. Because you can vibe code something and you go, okay, well, there's a front end to an app. You got no idea how it works.
I think what we're going to see too is like that the barrier of what like grunt work is keeps moving, right? Like I graduated university without even taking a database class.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like I didn't know how databases worked. I thought they were big, scary things. You go back a few years, maybe even more than a few, people thought like linters and IDEs were dumb. Like, uh, go back even further, computers are dumb. Like, and, there's just this wild thing of, well, if you've never put a server in a rack, do you really understand networking? It's like, well, maybe not, but Azure abstracts a lot of that away. Like, at what point are our, to your point, front end frameworks going to be abstracted away that, like, maybe I don't care about inheritance, or maybe I don't care about componentalization because it just like does it itself, or who knows where it's going to be and where it's going to take us.
I think you're probably right. I mean, there was a point, right, where everyone knew everything about mainframe. No one knows anything about it now. There'll be a few still, but
Yeah,
um, like
COBOL.
the technology will just die out. Yeah, yeah. But a lot of
Yeah.
like core networking, because this is a really good example. Like if you work in just Azure, your
Mhm.
first ever job was cloud computing. If you learn networking from Azure, and then one day someone says to you, "We need to set up a VPN to our head office," you'll lose your mind. You'll be like, "What's a core switch? What's an edge switch? I don't know. I just use my laptop and I get to the Wi-Fi. That just takes me to the cloud." I'm like, well,
Yeah.
so I think some of them, some of the skills, I do worry, but I think yeah, maybe it all vanishes before it's a problem, or maybe we see a resurgence and things start to go the other way and hybrid becomes more of a thing again.
Well, and we even see that with like announcements like Azure Foundry Local, people wanting to
Yeah,
run their LLMs on bare metal so they get more predictive costs, right? Because then they don't surge, but they have the issue of hitting the capacity of their on-prem servers. So like I don't know, maybe we're going to be in a chip renaissance where people are going to be buying server racks and putting them back in, and then to your point, we're going to need to skill up those what is today old school network admins or sysadmins because we're going to be back to doing it again. I think
yeah,
it's only time will tell at this point.
yeah, yeah. No, I've had a client reach out to us about HCI, and they do manufacturing. They want to do basically exactly what Microsoft have tout. You know, I don't know if you've seen their use case where it's scanning a bolt. So they're saying like, oh, Stack is really good because you could do all this compute locally and then just send the results out to Azure. They want to do
Mm-hmm.
that. It's for food processing, but they want to do a very similar thing. It's actually I thought it was pretty interesting. They want to, when you get a chicken fillet and it's got a bit of like blood defect in the
Yeah,
chicken fillet, they want to scan for that and then do something with it.
interesting.
I didn't know it was a thing people wanted to do, but cool, we can do it.
Yeah, I think that's one thing that AI is struggling with right now too. Is like people don't necessarily think big enough, or it's like a different way of thinking. That who knows what the world will look like once we all collectively grasp our mind around what AI could do. Like, are we just not going to send emails anymore? Are we going to, not have Teams meetings anymore? Is your boss just going to talk to a camera and that's going to be summarized and then sent out to everybody so nobody has to sit on a call with them anymore? Like,
And then
I don't know.
your AI assistant will reply to it, and yeah,
Yeah.
then your
And then put it
Neuralink
on
will.
your to do list and
Yeah,
maybe you don't even talk to your coworkers anymore. We all just live
what
in our
a
dark basements.
what a lovely dystopian future we're describing. Yeah,
I don't know. Who knows, man? We'll just see where it all shakes out. I think we're coming close to the end here. Do you have any last minute calls to action? People check out, or how do they connect with you if they want to learn more about what you guys do?
yeah. So if you wanna see the content that I produce, absolutely reach out to me on LinkedIn. Where we can put that link in the description if you want or wherever.
Yep.
From a Synextra point of view, as you can tell by my lovely environment that I'm in, we have quite a serious marketing department. So if you want to follow Synextra on LinkedIn or even YouTube, because we have a YouTube channel, and we also do a podcast that we put on Spotify as well, which is pretty good. We give away a lot of free advice. The general thinking of my CEO is that we give away some of this stuff that IT managers want to just do themselves. And we'll literally show them these are all the button clicks, go and do this thing. It means that when they get to a thing that they're not comfortable doing, they're probably going to reach out to someone they trust. If someone's giving you free information, you're probably fairly fair with them. So, yeah, that's the thought process.
Awesome. So you heard it here first. If you want any free advice, reach out to Elliot on LinkedIn.
Mm. No, not for everything. If you've got an AKS cluster that needs building and you want to deploy loads of apps to it, we can have a chat, but it might not be free.
Within reason is the asterisk
Yeah.
there.
Yeah. There's definitely some T's and C's.
Awesome. Cool. Well, I appreciate you chatting with us. I think that'll
Yeah.
be a wrap, and we'll see everybody again next week.
Bro, thank you very much for
All right.
having me.
Yeah. Thanks for joining. Bye, everybody.